In recent weeks, public discourse on Ghana's stance on the LGBTQ plus issues has intensified following a series of developments that have reignited national debate. The expiration and reintroduction of the controversial Family Values Bill has once again brought to the fore questions about the country's legislative direction on issues of sexuality and cultural identity. Matters were further compounded when images of two men in seemingly suggestive poses taken at the Independence Avenue circulated online, sparking outrage and rising concerns about moral values in public spaces. Amidst this backdrop, the government of Ghana on Monday abstained from a crucial vote on the United Nations Human Rights Council, a vote to renew the mandate of the independent expert on protection against violence and discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender identity. The government's decision to abstain has left many questioning Ghana's true position on the discrimination of LGBT activities, with some suggesting a growing lack of commitment to upholding traditional Ghanaian values. Now, in today's edition of Beyond the Headlines, we engage Dr. Charles Prempeh, a research fellow at the Center for Culture and African Studies, Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology, and one of the strong advocates for the Family Values Bill, to help us unpack the Ministry of Foreign Affairs' press release earlier. Good evening, Dr. Prempeh, and thank you for joining us tonight.
Good evening, and thank you for having me.
All right. Dr. Prempeh,
good evening to your listeners and viewers.
Dr. Prempeh, how do you interpret the Ghanaian government's decision to abstain from the UN Human Rights Council vote on the mandate protecting LGBT plus individuals?
It is duplicitous.
Can you hear me, Dr. Prempeh?
Yes, I said it is highly duplicitous.
Highly duplicitous. And why do you say that?
Yeah, because the government has been very unfaithful with the Ghanaian constituency, full of lies, contradictions, and lack of willingness to hold the fortress of family. This is not even about culture. I mean, let's separate culture from the conversation. It is about God's creation, it is about procreativity, and it's about protecting the fortress of God's creation, as I said earlier. And we've seen consistently that the politicians have decided to go according to their own interests, not the interests of the nation. And this government, as well as the previous one, have both been very, very duplicitous, and they've sought to fleece the Ghanaian public. In fact, the whole statement issued by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, it doesn't even make sense to begin with. Totally irrational, very inane, and at best unintelligible.
Find out from you, what message do you think this abstinence sends to both the international community and to Ghanaians at home?
Yeah, it shows the unwillingness of the government to do the will of Ghanaians. Now, let's take the statement one after the other, if you want us to look at it. So we expose the duplicitous nature and character of this very government.
We can do that.
Yeah, so to begin with, now if you take the third point, it reads, the question before the council was whether persons who identify as LGBTQI should be protected against violence and discrimination or not. So this is similar to somebody accosting you in the way to ask you, have you stopped stealing? You see, if you say yes, then you admit that you were once stealing. If you say no, the same thing. So it is better when such a question is put to you, you ask, but have I ever stolen? Or why are you putting this question to me? Because it doesn't identify with my status as a person. So if indeed this was a type of question that was put to vote, then it tells you that fundamentally, the whole thing was skewed towards incriminating or forcing nations to acquiesce to a position that the international community wants to take. So if the Ghanaian representative indeed had the will of the people at heart, this question should have been interrogated.
But do you think, Doc, do you think there would have been that opportunity for the Ghanaian authority to interrogate this question?
Well, Ghana is a sovereign nation, and we are not cajoled to follow the dictates of the rest of the world. That is the meaning of sovereignty. Sovereignty is to have the capacity to decide on the exception. So if Ghana couldn't have interrogated it, then why do we call ourselves a sovereign nation? Fundamentally.
Let's continue with yes.
And then again, if you take the so-called quotation from the Ghanaian representative and the speech he or she delivered, it reads, and I quote, "Our understanding of the traditional definition of gender, fundamentally, there's not a traditional definition of gender. Gender is not defined by any tradition. It is ontologically constructed. There's nothing like traditional definition. So that in itself is fundamentally flawed. Logically illogical. So to begin with that. So, but I continue, our understanding of the traditional definition of gender is the male sex or female sex, especially when considered with reference to social and cultural differences. Similarly, first in our view refers to either of the two main categories. Now here's where the problem comes in, into which humans and most other living things are divided and used for. Now, what are they used for? One, statistical purposes and policy monitoring. Gender or sexuality is fundamentally and primarily not used for statistics. It is for procreation, fundamentally. Fundamentally, it's for procreation. So you see, the whole, like I said, the whole statement betrays a certain cunning in this government and the unwillingness to protect the frontiers of the sanctity of human family. So this statement betrays. I mean, the statement doesn't make sense. As I say, it doesn't. Because if you have the binaries of biological male and biological female, the fundamental primordial rule is that of procreation. In fact, not even recreation. Fundamentally, it's for procreation. So that statistics never comes in. At any rate, the world globally is seeing a ditch in population. So you think what the Western world is doing today to boost their population, their interest is for statistics? No. The stakes are much higher than that.
Okay.
Higher than that. So that's what I'm saying, that the government is being deceptive. He's not being real and truthful to the Constitution. And then if you go back to...
All right, Doc, I want to find you, in your view, does this abstinence reflect a shift in Ghana's foreign policy or balancing the act between international pressure and domestic cultures?
No, you see, it doesn't do any... You see, first of all, remember that if you are arguing from the perspective of subsidiarity, okay, you decide from the smaller unit before you move out. And so, you see, every sovereign nation, according to Ghana's constitution, must fundamentally and primarily secure the loyalty of Ghanaians first. So it is the interests of Ghanaians that should and take precedence over every other influence, such that Ghana is to broker relationship with the international community. We go with the interests of Ghanaians fundamentally at heart before anything else, so that if a decision is taken over there and it rather causes rancor and near chaos home, then it doesn't reflect Ghanaianism. It doesn't reflect the Constitution of Ghana. You see, that's why I'm saying that the whole statement is flawed. Now, in fact, let's go back to the statement. If you look at the Constitution provision that whoever released the statement indicated, you see that the categories of human beings or constitutionalities that are to be protected, there's not like sexuality in it. It's either on grounds of gender, race, color, ethnic origin, religion, creed, or social and economic status. It is nowhere mentioned here that the right of sexuality or people who claim to have a certain sexual orientation is included. So that stuff is just to throw dust into the eyes of Ghanaians.
Interesting, but Doc,
I'm saying that. Yeah, sorry.
You've been a strong advocate for family value bills. Could you explain the core objectives of this bill and why you believe it is so much important for Ghana?
Yes, you see, the civilization, right? You can't hold human civilization afloat when you impose culture of death on society. All right? So that is fundamentally the first point.
Okay.
That's why I said in my earlier submission that if you look at the world today, the so-called Asian tigers, Japan, South Korea, North Korea, even Russia, of course, then we move to Eastern Europe, Russia, even the United States of America, and the Scandinavian countries, they used to have the best family policies in the world. Today, they are all struggling with population decline. And guess what? Japan, for example, is giving its workers 4 days, active days to work, so that the rest of the days, possibly they could, stay together and have sex or copulate and have children.
Interesting.
In Scandinavian countries like Norway, they are even giving people money, resources, hoping that they will have children, and they are turning it down. So what it means is that we are beginning to see the nemesis of this cultural madness that was imposed on humanity. And so if we as Ghanaians do not stand strong and protect the logicality of the human family and to protect the sanctity of God's creation, then we'll find ourselves in the world where the so-called developed economy is. And then the other side of it is also that no economy can grow or sustain without human beings.
Sure.
Because basic economics tells us that production never ends until it reaches the final consumer. Now imagine you have aging population. Why are you going to drive your labor force? And that is why even in the US today, Trump is seeking to subsidize the cost of IVF so people will have children. So what I'm trying to say is that if you run in the counter-cultural direction of the ethos of civilization, which fundamentally begins with the family, then human civilization will collapse. Fundamentally, that's what it means. The second, I'll make it very quick. The second is that it is not just also about human right. It is about ideological globalism. It is about ideological battle that's ongoing. The extreme leftists have taken a stance to destroy humanity, and it percolates every aspect of life. Even religious leaders can talk. Academics is worse, because even getting funding these days, where you publish, to whom you publish, and what you write, are circumscribed in the madness of this LGBT issue. Okay, so that is why we need to take a stance. And as a nation, we expect those who represent us, those we've voted for and given them the mandate, all right, to take decisions that represents us. At any rate, this is a bi or a non-partisan position of the people. And that is why this government needs to be very careful, because already we've seen the indicators that Mahama has shown unfaithfulness. In fact, it started in 2012, if you recall, if we are of intellectual history subject.
Doc, thank you very, very much. Our time is right now. I wish we could very much expand the conversation, but our time has finally run out. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
I'm very grateful for the opportunity as well.
All right. Dr. Charles Prempeh is a research fellow at the Center for Culture and African Studies at the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology, and a strong advocate for the Family Values Bill. Grace, that was Dr. Prempeh.
Point there with regards to the fact that government wasn't able to vote, but let's wait and see how things turn out with regards to this discussion.